Welcome, AP Psychology students. We're going to take a look at Module 42 together today, which is about expressed emotion. And so, our objectives, we want to be able to describe our ability to communicate non-verbally and discuss gender differences in this capacity. Discuss culture-specific and culturally universal aspects of nonverbal expressions of emotion, and describe how facial expressions influence our feelings. So I think this is a pretty interesting module, pretty light, so we'll get to it. First thing, if you look at this slide here, this was a replication of studies that have been done in what emotions people detect first. And the location of my camera on the screen may have, hurt the outcome of this, but what they found is that most people are able to detect negative emotions, especially anger, before happy emotions. And the speculation is that this may be an evolutionary trait. So it was good for our ancestors of long ago to be able to spot anger because that may have signaled a threat. So just something to consider. Some group differences when it comes to being able to detect emotion in other people. Introverts versus extroverts. So quick side note, an introvert is someone who a little bit more quiet. They gain energy from solitude. They prefer solitude a lot of the time, not all the time. And then extroverts are more, the life of the party. They like to chat more and just, small talk and those kind of things. But they've actually found that introverts they tend to perform better at reading other people's emotions. I'm an introvert, and so we're kind of observers by nature. Just kind of sit back and watch what's going on. Whereas extroverts are easier to read. They tend to be more expressive. They kind of show their emotions, wear their emotions on their sleeve a little bit more. I'm kind of just giving you an overview, highlights from the section. Generally, when it comes to core emotions, people are pretty good at recognizing how people are feeling, even if it's a subtle facial expression. It's not obvious, but just kind of a little, maybe even like a micro expression. People are fairly good at picking up on those things. However, we're not very good at detecting lies in other people. In the reading, they talk about a few groups of people that are maybe slightly better than chance, but generally speaking, we're not. So if you have friends out there, they're like, "Oh, I can always tell who's lying." More likely than not, that's not the case. They just have confirmation bias. They remember the times that they do, and they don't remember the times that they don't. There are some gender differences when it comes to the expression of emotion and the ability to detect expression of emotion. So women tend to outperform men at reading nonverbal cues. So just like facial expressions, body, language, those kind of things, and decoding other people's emotions, and for expressing empathy. They also tend to experience emotions more deeply. So like the areas of the brain that process emotion tend to show more activation than that for men. Now, all that being said, I want to make sure that we're clear that we're not saying that men and women are on like two different planets and, just way different here. These are fairly subtle differences among the group. I don't want you to leave this video thinking all men are like this and all women are like that. That's not the case. I'm sure there's quite a bit of overlap between the two populations, meaning there are some guys that are better at reading nonverbal cues and that are more empathetic than some women. So we're looking at group averages. Just want to make that really, really clear. Men tend to do a little bit better at expressing anger because culturally that seems to be a more accepted emotion for men, which is, kind of sad that that's where we are as a culture, but it's not just our culture. It's, fairly universal around the world. And so there's a lot of biological and cultural reasons for that. For example, higher rates of testosterone kind of predispose men to be more prone to anger. Genetics, going back to our ancestors, the ones that were more aggressive tended to get more food and be able to provide. It may not be the most, the best traits to have in the year 2020. It's debatable at least, but historically, from an evolutionary perspective, it was. These are what they call the universal emotions, meaning every culture has these emotions. And so the big idea to get across is that the core emotions are universal from culture to culture. So you should be able to look at these people's faces and know what emotion they're expressing. So, A would be happiness, B, surprise, C, fear, D, sadness, E, anger. F is usually the hardest one for people. Disgust. So if you're disgusted with something. But again, main idea, the core emotions, the facial expressions are the same worldwide. Oh, my little Ron Swanson plug. If you're a Parks and Rec fan, hit me up. It's a great show. So yeah, culturally universal expressions, like we looked at on the previous slide, there are differences among cultures in the amount of expression that are shown. You think about like Western cultures, which would be like Western Europe, the United States, tend to be more expressive than more Eastern cultures, countries from Asia. Maybe not entirely, but generally speaking, that's the case. Even within Western countries, though, you think about, not to get too stereotypical, but there are some, regions that, it's more like, they're going to hold hands and they're going to kiss each other on the cheek and those kind of things. I have more of a, my ancestors are mostly from the United Kingdom, so Ireland, Britain, and, again, not to stereotype too much, but we tend to be a little bit more stoic, so a lot of awkward hugs at the Dowell household on holidays. You also think about issues with technology, how it's sometimes hard to express emotions through text and those kind of things. Emojis help, but it's not as good as the real thing. And you wonder long term if we communicate primarily through text. We've texted so much more than we used to. 15, 20 years ago, people would be like, why are you texting me when you could call me? And now it's, why are you calling me if you can text me? So it's definitely changing the way we interact with each other. And you kind of wonder long term how that's going to affect people's ability to detect emotions. Are we going to get rusty with our ability to do that? It'd be an interesting way to, thing to study. And then finally, the research on this is a little bit mixed, but it's worth talking about. There is some research out there that suggests that you can actually alter your emotion with your facial expression. So they actually called this the facial feedback effect. And so the classic study had some individuals in an experimental group. They would put a pen in their mouth like this. I don't even want to put it in my mouth, with germs and everything, but they do that and they would activate their smiling muscles. And then other people, they would put it here to act, and they'd have to hold the pen, and that would activate frowning muscles. And then they showed them various, cartoon strips and those kind of things. And they reliably found that the people who had activated the smiling rated the cartoon strips as funnier. And there's been various, offshoots of this study, but they've basically come up with the facial feedback effect, which says that smiling can actually, we're not going to overcome depression here today, but like smiling can boost mood ever so slightly, and then frowning can actually, make your mood lower. It can make your mood poor. But there have been some replication issues with this theory. So I just feel like you deserve to know that recently there's been some issues. But the behavior feedback too is just basically the idea of, if you want to be happy, act happy. So think about body language. Hold your shoulders back, head up high, take long strides versus having your head down, shuffling your feet. Doing that can actually, alter your mood. So that would be the behavior feedback. So the facial stuff, that's facial feedback. The walking would be, the way you hold your body would be the behavior feedback. Quick application. Which theory of emotion would this support? If you think back to James Lange, Cannon-Bard, Schachter two-factor. So if your physiology is one way and that causes the emotion, I'll let you ponder it for a second. Maybe click pause and see. Okay, so this would be James Lange. So when we talk about James Lange, and a lot of people are like, oh, that just doesn't make any sense. It's counterintuitive. But it just drives home the point that there is some evidence for it. I still tend to think Schachter's the best theory out there, but there's some evidence for James Lange. So that's all I have for now. Hopefully you enjoy this section and bring any questions you have to class. Thanks, guys.